Hello everyone and welcome to something different I've been meaning to do for a long time. Now, by occupation, I'm a driving instructor and I find that still a lot of people struggle with parallel parking. What I'm going to do is use GTA to show you how you can park, basically. There are a lot of tricks that people use to park their car, but I don't like tricks. They don't always work, and instead what I'm going to do is help you understand and use the car's physics and learn how it responds to what you do. First things first, you need to understand what the car does when you steer. A lot of people are mistaken when driving backwards, thinking you need to steer the opposite way. This is not true. If you steer right, the car goes to the right. It's true that the front of the car is going to the left, but when you're driving backwards, you don't need to think with the front of the car, you need to think with the back of the car. Similarly, when you turn left, the back of the car goes to the left. Now for the actual parking. Make sure that your car is parallel to the curb, not to the other car, because in this case, the car that we're parking next to is a bit crooked. And also make sure that the wheels of the car are perfectly straight and not already turned to one side, for example, because that's going to make things a little tricky. Now this way of parking lets you put the left side of the car in a straight line once you've finished. So, if the car you're trying to park behind is far from the curb, you'll have to keep that in mind. What you also have to keep in mind for later is the distance between your car and the other car, not from the mirrors but from the actual size of the car. Now basically, when the back bumpers of the car are in line, you can park without hitting that car, but you'll have to park perfectly. So, to be safe, what we're going to do is keep the turning point of our car in mind. Now, what is a turning point? Well, in this case, it's going to be the right back wheel of our car. So, we're going to drive a little bit back until the right back wheel of our car is in line, basically, with the bumper of the car. If you find it difficult to see where your back wheel is, you can also look at your back seat, which is usually slightly in front of the back wheels. So if you then drive a little bit more backwards, that'll give you a little bit more space, which is going to make sure that you definitely won't hit the bumper of that car. When standing here, the next step is going to be turning our car. So we're going to turn the wheels completely to the right and drive slightly backwards until our car is at a 45-degree angle as opposed to the curb, like this pretty much. Something like this, yeah. If you find this difficult to see, you can always think, well, that is 0 degrees. And that is 90 degrees, so I have to be somewhere in between there, something like this. At this point, we won't turn our wheels to the left completely, but we'll drive straight back the same distance we stood from the car in front of us. In this case, it was like about half a meter, like a little bit more than a meter probably. So we'll drive backwards a little over half a meter, I think, something like this, I reckon. And then we turn completely to the left, and when we then drive backwards, we have parked our car. As you can now see, well, I'm not completely straight yet, but okay, there we go. As you can now see, the left sides of our car are in the same line. I parked pretty well, but as you can see, I'm also far from the curb because the car in front of me is far from the curb. Now, what also helps is analyzing the car in front of you right before you're going to park there. What kind of a car is it? Is it smaller than you? Is it wider than you? How far is it standing from the curb? Those are all things that you can keep in mind. For instance, right now I'm too far from the curb, so that would have meant that the part that I drive backwards a little, I would have had to drive back a little further. Now I can still solve this. This is just fine. How am I going to solve this? I'm going to pretend there's a car behind me, okay? If you don't have a lot of space, the best thing to do is always to correct backwards. Correcting forwards is almost always going to leave your car standing crooked. We don't want that. We want our car to stand in a straight line. So we're going to drive backwards as far as we can, which is going to be a bit difficult to see when you're actually inside of the car, especially when there's nothing behind us, but oh well. What you're then going to do is steer to the left and drive forwards, which is going to mean that the back of the car is already facing where we want it to go. And then we turn to the right because we want our car to go more to the right, so we drive backwards a little bit more. And then we steer to the left and we let our car become parallel. Okay, I drove past the line. So, let's do this in one motion, shall we? I'm going to start driving backwards. Slowly. Yeah, there we go. Turn the wheels completely. Let the car turn 45 degrees angles, back a bit, and then completely to the left. And there we go. Bit more. Drive forwards a bit, and there we go. We have parked! Now, if I wanted to stand closer to the curb, I can do the same thing. Just have to make sure that I drive back a little bit more. Let's keep the distance from this car in mind. It is, let's say, like something like 70, 80 centimeters, something like that, probably. And also, the distance that he has from the curb is probably something like that. A little under a meter, I think. Oh well. So, I'm gonna have to drive back a little more than a meter to park perfectly. Let's try this. Let's drive back slowly, start turning. 45 degrees back and to the left. And here we go. Nicely done, mate! Drive forwards a bit. And we just park like a boss. Let's just do some kind of victory jump on the car. There we go. Brilliant!